Okay, so welcome everyone to Take Charge for September 2015. I think it's fair to say that everybody here knows that it's very important to exercise on a regular basis. And we know there's many, many benefits to exercising. It strengthens your heart, improves your risk factors for heart disease and many other chronic disease. And my personal favorite, we know that exercise makes you feel good. So that's plenty of motivation to exercise. What we're seeing now, though, is more people are starting to focus on not what benefits are you missing if you don't exercise, but what are the negative outcomes of actually sitting down. And it's actually quite frightening at what we're finding by spending too much time sitting. So today we're very fortunate to have with us Avi Biswas. Avi is a researcher working on his PhD, does his research with University of Toronto and also with us here in Toronto Rehab. And he's going to be talking to us about sitting is the new smoking. Avi, thank you very much. Thanks.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Hello world. How are your seats doing? Good. Don't get too comfortable. My objective in this talk is to get you really uneasy, and at some point you're going to want to stand up. So my name is Avi. I'm a doctoral candidate at University of Toronto as well as the Toronto Rehab Institute. And a lot of my work and the work that the research team does here is that we work in the background trying our best to do work that helps you guys get as much of a benefit from this program as possible. So my particular work, my doctoral work, surrounds sitting and the amount of sitting that cardiac rehab patients do. I analyze that and then I try to see whether it's at risk for patients here in the program. So a little bit about me. I myself am a son of a cardiac rehab graduate. My dad went through cardiac rehab a few times, and actually because he went through cardiac rehab, the whole family learned all about the positive benefits of a good lifestyle, a healthy diet. We grew up with skim milk and we had no skin on our chicken, so I had a really crummy childhood, basically. So I think my ambition to get into this area of research was really because I saw my own dad struggle with a disease, but was able to flip that around by making positive changes in his own lifestyle. So I wanted to pursue an area where I could look into prevention. Now, over the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years, I came across a lot of articles on, reputable news sources, the BBC, CBC, Globe and Mail, which were saying really sensationalist things that sitting is a new smoking, sitting is killing you, you're losing a couple of years of your life if you sit a lot. And I wasn't really sure if that was true. I mean, I guess I put my cynical, skeptical lens, like my glasses on, and I was thinking, we all sit, and why aren't we dying? I mean, if it's so bad for us, why is it, where's the evidence around that? So I thought that would be a really interesting topic to study, to really make a convincing claim, if there is a claim, of whether sitting is bad for you, and then maybe find out a way, because we all do it, to develop a strategy where we can get people like my dad and like you guys to sit less and get as much of a benefit from cardiac rehab as possible. So ultimately, with this talk, I want to first convince you guys about this question mark. I guess, is sitting in fact the new smoking? And then the second part of my talk is to really work with you to, I guess, form a little bit of a discussion to see how you can maybe incorporate some tips and some strategies into your daily routine to get you guys to sit less. So, no talk about exercise, sitting, can really do without exercise, because exercise, as we know now, because you guys have done really well to get to this stage, is an incredibly effective therapy in medicine. And in fact, we all know now with really convincing evidence that regular exercise, if we can do it regularly and diligently, adds a whole host of positive benefits. Not only do we feel better, it improves our mental health, our well-being, increases our lifespan, and protects us from a whole host of bad illnesses like heart disease, certain forms of cancer, type 2 diabetes. So it's something that's incredibly effective, and there's no wonder that it's incorporated into cardiac rehab, and it works. So then you think, if exercise works, why do we care about sitting? So in order to really think about this, it's important to really understand the history of how we really understood the evolution of what we call now fitness and exercise. So a little bit of a history lesson. In the 1950s was when we would really say is the birth of what we call exercise is medicine, or exercise science. And in fact, a scientist or a researcher in England called Morris looked at the differences in heart attacks between bus conductors and double-decker buses in London and drivers. And they found that the bus conductors, who would typically go up and down the stairs on those buses and move around and collect ticket stubs, had a far lower risk of getting a heart attack than drivers. So drivers who were sitting a long time sitting had a higher risk. And at that time, that research was momentous because it really led to the birth of exercise science and exercise medicine. And you started to see that if we exercise regularly, or those who exercise, you can really reduce your risk of a lot of these negative things. So then in the 1980s, we changed our perception, and we kind of, I guess, broadened our perception of exercise and thinking that there's a lot more nuance. We don't have to necessarily exercise hard to get a benefit, and we can do things like aerobics, yoga, taking the escalator or the stairs instead of the elevator. So a lot of little things, adjustments, where you can get a whole host of benefits associated with exercise instead of having to jog outside if you can't do it. So, and then in the 15 years ago, we went completely to the other end of the spectrum, where we started to see that maybe even what we do when we're not exercising can play a part in our health. So maybe the overall volume or accumulated minutes of movements that we do in a day can play a big part in our health other than exercising. So that was really the birth of what we call sedentary behavior research. And that sedentary behavior, or being sedentary or sitting, leads to a whole host of risks independently of if we exercise. So I use that term sedentary. What do I mean by sedentary? So the word sedentary comes from the Latin word sedere, which is literally to sit. And it's really sitting type activities or non-movements that we associate with sitting and low energy burn, low calorie burn. So what you guys are doing now, or when you're using the computer, watching TV, when you're lying down on the couch, these are all sedentary behaviors. So what we're finding is that a lot of the definitions around sedentary behavior, a lot of the media exposure is not because we're not exercising enough, but it's because we're not moving enough. So unfortunately, it's these sedentary behaviors that we're doing a lot of, and Canadians are doing a lot of sitting. And what this pie chart shows is just results of a study where researchers looked at, I guess, an average of Canadians and their movements in a day. And if you look in the light blue, or on the right, the large segment on the right in light blue, most Canadians are spending 10 hours a day sitting. Which is startling because they spend 10 hours a day sleeping. So then 20 hours in your day you're spent sedentary. That's pretty scary. So then I was like, this is pretty startling, because if sitting is bad for you and Canadians are sitting a lot, then sitting might be a hidden risk factor for a whole host of diseases, but we just might not be sure about that yet. So then I started to look into it, and I wanted to consolidate all the research out there, and I wanted to figure out what's that risk. What can I tell people? How bad is sedentary disease for you, sedentary behavior for you, and how much of a risk am I if I sit a lot? So we did a study which was published in January and reached a lot of positive media exposure, where we looked at, just very simply, what are the risks associated with sitting for a long period of time. So I'm in that boat. I try to exercise regularly, but I sit for the rest of my day. So I was also interested to see what happens if I exercise. Does exercise play a part in maybe reducing the risk that might come from sitting, if in fact sitting is a risk? So we looked at that question. And what we did was, it seems a little complicated, but I thought I'll just say a little bit about the methods of how we did it. We looked at all the literature out there, and we started off with about 21,000 studies that looked at the relationship between sitting and sedentary behavior with the health outcomes. So diabetes, heart attacks, cancer. And we only focused on adults. So studies that looked at only the risks among adults and only isolating the effects of sitting. So not looking at whether people exercise, but whether they sat, and only the effects of sitting. And then we looked at how much of a role does exercise play in that risk. So I also showed this to show off how much work I did, and it took me like 2 years to do this. So this is a little complicated at first, but I'll try to explain this to you as best I can. This is what we call a forest plot. And really, it's just a graphical way of saying the risk you are if you sit for long periods of time. So remember, we looked at all the studies, and what we did was we tried to find an average of all the risks across the studies for different diseases. So if you see here, there's different rows, and in different rows on the right are little boxes. And every box to the right of this vertical line shows you, the further to the right of this vertical line, the greater the risk you are. And over here, you see every number starts with 1 point something. Anything greater than a 1 point something, let's say 1 is how a normal person's health. Anything above the 1, let's say 24, means you have a 24% greater risk of that disease in that row. So let's say sitting for long periods of time, let's say that's 8 hours a day and more, that's how we kind of classified sitting, leads to a 24% increased risk, and this is on average across all the papers, for dying from all causes. And then an 18% greater risk for heart disease mortality, 14% greater risk for getting a heart attack, and 17% greater risk for certain forms of cancer, mostly around the GI tract and reproductive systems. So those kind of cancers, so like GI cancers, ovarian cancers, and so forth. And greater incidence of cancer, a little more than average, so 13%, if you sit a bit less. And the highest risk was for type 2 diabetes, which is a whopping 91%. Which is probably linked to, because diabetes is linked to a lot of these other diseases, we would think that diabetes has the highest risk. So it's pretty startling, and we found this consistently across all the studies that we looked at among adults. So it suggests that at least we can be pretty sure that sitting is pretty bad for you and in a very bad way if we sit for long periods of time. So this is just a summary of what we found, and the greatest risk comes with type 2 diabetes. So then the next part of my question, I guess I can also throw this out to you guys. How many of you would say you exercise regularly, as often as you can? Great. I'm sure a lot of you are putting your hands up because you see Rob here at the front. Now, could you guys put your hands up again, those of you who put your hands up? Now, how many of you would say you also sit for about 8 hours a day? 8 hours. Think about it. Like, watching the TV, driving to the groceries, to get your groceries, yeah? So a few of you, my hand would also go up here because I have to sit a lot to do my research. And I wanted to know, what effect does my exercise play? I mean, can I just do enough by exercising? Will I be able to reduce all that risk if I exercise? So I looked at two groups, independent of that study. I looked at those people who are the most inactive, so those who are highly sedentary, and also not exercising enough, so not meeting their guidelines. And I wanted to see what their risk is. So I looked at only the studies that reported that, and I wanted to find an average. So among that group, again, that really complicated diagram, but just look at the box on the bottom, that red box. And again, so the number is basically an average estimate across all those studies. And we find that if you are highly inactive, your risk so highly inactive as in not exercising and sitting for a long period of time, you have a greater risk for dying from all causes by 46%. Now remember that number, 46%, because I'm going to show you another statistic from this group of people who are exercising and sitting a lot. So how does that change? So again, looking at the other group, so some of us and me. Yes. So what? Sometimes. So how does that change? Well, now it's 16% greater risk. So it's gone from 46 to 16. So you've reduced your risk by 30%. But you've reduced your risk, but what's important to know is that the risk still exists. You still have a 16% greater risk if you sit and you exercise, which suggests that sitting is still bad for you even if you exercise. So that sounds pretty scary, because then what do you do? Well, we'll get to that part, but really the idea is that sitting and exercise or not exercising affect your body in different ways. So you want to be thinking about not only exercising, and by all means continue to exercise, but also try to find ways in your day to sit less. And that's that common theme that I'm going to be talking about for the rest of this talk. So in a nutshell, risk is more, and sorry for that complicated language here, I kind of copied this slide from my other talks, but the mortality risk still exists if you exercise, but it's more pronounced if you don't exercise. So continue to exercise, but try to sit less. So the next question you might be having is, what is it about sitting that's bad for you? If I was to convince you guys that sitting is bad for you. And the simple answer is we don't know entirely. We have a couple of hunches, and these are based in laboratory experiments. And I think a lot of researchers are pushing on to one idea, which is getting a lot of credibility, which is to do with metabolic toxicity. What does that mean? So when we're sitting for a long period of time, we don't really flush out a lot of metabolites that we build up. And a lot of the muscles that keep us upright when we're standing or moving around are also working to regulate a lot of those pathways that remove those metabolites, like how we remove glucose or sugars, excess sugars, how we reduce the fats in our body. So when we sit for long periods of time, those metabolites stay in our body. And the diseases that we find associated with sitting are linked with the inefficiency or ineffectiveness of our metabolic system in working. So what this graph shows is just the firing in our muscles when we're sitting, when we're standing, and when we're moving around. So if you see here where it says sitting and the arrow going up, there's hardly any firing in our muscles. But when we're doing something as simple as standing, there's a lot more firing going on, and then our metabolic system is working a lot more efficiently. And then stepping, just taking a few steps, means our body is a lot more active. So something as simple as standing can be so helpful. So in the conclusion to the research side of this talk, try to exercise regularly as much as you can, because that's great. And because you've gone to this stage, I'm sure you can do that really well. But also think about moments in your day when you're sitting and try to replace those moments with standing or moving around. So think about when you're, say when you're having your breakfast and having your cereal, and if you don't feel awkward doing it, try standing and having your cereal. That could be good. I try to do that. I don't do it all the time, but I try to do it. And another thing I'd like to say is sitting itself is not bad for you. I don't want you to go outside of this talk and start telling people that, or telling people off that they're sitting, because it's not sitting that's bad for you. It's sitting too much, like a lot of other things, is bad for you. So you don't want to do anything in excess, and you don't want to do sitting in excess. So you want to just think about whether you're sitting for too long and try to replace those moments with less sitting. So then now starts the healthy discussion part of this talk. I wanted to learn from you guys, what are your sitting patterns like? When are you sitting the most? What are those moments in your day that you're sitting? Any ideas on that? Yes?
At work.
At work. So mostly when and are you sitting at a cubicle, or are you sitting at a desk? Yeah. So, and how many hours do you spend sitting at work?
I mean, I get up a lot, but I'm going to say probably 4 to 5.
And are you sitting just continuously for 4 and 5 hours?
Well, no, because I drink a lot of water.
Yeah.
So
That's actually
often, so.
that's a great tip, actually, because
Yes,
if you drink a lot of water,
Yes.
you go to the washroom a lot.
Yes.
Right? Anyone else? Anyone else find that they sit because of work, or because they have family that they have to look after, or because are any of you not sitting very much, or do you have any tips for the crowd? Yes.
I don't sit much.
Oh.
Matter of fact, my wife tells me to take 5.
Oh
In
yeah.
other words, the opposite.
Huh.
Always.
You're like an early adopter. That's great. And what keeps you from sitting? What would get you from standing? What would get you standing or moving around?
I just always have some activity I have
Oh,
to
great.
do. So I got to go from A to B.
So your ADD helps you, I guess. That's great. So I mean, yes.
Most of us can influence how long we sit down for.
Yeah.
Do you have and you mentioned sitting for a long period of time, short period of time, do you have say a cutoff? Whereas if you're gonna sit a lot, which I do,
Yeah.
I can get up every 8 minutes if I have to.
Yeah, that's a good question, because
Well, what's your recommendation?
that's a good question. I didn't actually say how much sitting is too much. So I would say anything more than 8 hours a day is
No,
bad.
no,
Oh,
you
but
said-
how much continuous? 8 hours or 4 hours, more than 4 hours continuous of sitting would be bad.
Does anybody do that?
Sitting more than 4 hours?
Yeah.
Continuously?
Some people might have to, depending on your job, or if you're or even just even an hour straight is bad. So I'm going to get to the part where we talk about strategies, but you want to be thinking about breaking up even an hour. So whenever you start to feel a bit antsy or uncomfortable, you want to break that up. I can't give you a solid number yet, but I would say that 8 hours over the day is bad for you.
Yeah.
4 hours is very bad for you continuously. But 1 hour, if you're doing that straight, that's when you should start to think about breaking up your sitting.
So if I get up every 20 minutes.
That's great. And you've actually jumped the gun because I'm going to be talking about that
Okay,
too.
thank
Yeah. Yes.
I've been standing, my work is for standing most of my working life. If I do sit down in the evening, I can't sit down for too long. Within about an hour and a half, I have to get up because if I sit too long,
Yeah.
2 hours, when I get up, I get cramps in my legs and in my thighs. And I have to start moving.
Yeah.
So I've been moving, I always move.
That's great. That's
Yeah, but
that's great.
Cramps, sometimes if I'm in the theater,
Yeah.
okay, so if there's recess and I get up and walk. But then the second half, I sit for longer. When I get up, I can hardly walk from the cramps.
Yeah. It's I guess sometimes it's hard to find breaks to stand when you're in a theater or somewhere else. And I guess my aim eventually is to find ways to push standing more so that you don't have to feel as comfortable for a long period of time when you're uncomfortable sitting. Yeah.
At work and then if I do home,
Yeah.
outside, it's always standing, moving around.
That's great. That's great. And you're doing really well for your health. So your uncomfortableness is helping you in a way.
Sometimes I get so tired standing.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I know I have to sit down for at least a half an hour.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
my legs can't take it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I'm gonna move to the.
It's the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's working for you, but it's giving you distress. But ultimately, you're doing a good thing by taking little breaks, and if it's giving you less discomfort, that's also better. So just a bit on the next slide, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an idea. So the next part of my talk is really looking at the next part of my thesis. So now I've convinced you guys about sitting and how it's bad for you. But the next part of my research really looks at how bad is it for you guys, for the cardiac rehab patient. And in order for me to do that, I need to really, and that's why I asked the question I had before, was because I need to kind of think as to what it's like in a life for a typical patient. And like my dad as well. So let's say, and I'm not sure if this will show, oh yeah, it will show. So let's say we take this gentleman, and it's just a stock photo from Google Images, and these blue boxes are just symbolize moments in his day when he's sitting. So again, we talked about this. It could be he starts off his day having breakfast, then he drives to work, so he takes a couple of hours driving to work, and then he has to spend a couple of hours then sitting in front of his cubicle, or in front of his computer at his cubicle. And then he's diligent like most of you, and this was work. Oh yeah. So he's diligent like most of you and will exercise if he can. Go to his local Good Life or come here. And but then the rest of his day, that's not showing, but just imagine there's a couple of more boxes here. The rest of his day is then being sedentary because he has to drive back home. He has to have a meal with his family, and then would probably pass out after watching a couple of hours of TV. So, you can't help it. And a lot of the times it's just hard to fit into your day moments when you're standing. So I think we've kind of established that with some of you, but it seems like most of you are already pretty healthy as it seems. So I guess I wanted to then make the case for cardiac rehab patients. And we just did a study, and it's about to be published, where we looked at a group of cardiac rehab patients. We looked at 31 patients who attended this program and were attending 12 weeks of exercise. So they were not only they were just regular exercisers and attending the cardiac rehab attending the cardiac rehab program, and we monitored how much time they spend exercising and how much time they spend sitting. And we gave them activity trackers to measure how much time they spend sitting over the course of a day for 12 weeks. And what we found was for all 31 people, all of them were highly sedentary. So what this graph shows is just like the variation over the 12 weeks, and you see that everyone in the left, you see the number of hours, and it starts from 14 hours and ends at 16, and this is everyone. Everyone sits for probably 14 hours. So it means that we might even be thinking that we don't sit for very long, but when we're actually tracking you, you're sitting a lot longer than you think you are. And it's these people who are exercising a lot. So what this graph shows are that on the left is exercise time, and it's everyone is generally over 140 minutes a week. And everyone, and this was a very exercise engaged population, and they were all exercising, but they were still very sedentary. So it means that the risk is very real, even among us, even if we think we're not, if we're exercising, but we're not sitting that much. So what can you do to reduce your risk? We've talked about a few ideas. I'm going to show you a video. Actually, after our study came out, we got a lot of positive press. And luckily, you might have heard of Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel actually came up with a little short skit I thought you guys might find a bit find funny. I don't know where it is exactly. Well, there it is.
There you go.
So he kind of used our findings to come up with tips that you guys can incorporate.
This is news you probably don't want to hear while sitting down. A new study suggests that sitting for prolonged periods of time can significantly increase your risk of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and early death, even for people who exercise regularly. The study found that health risks are worse for people who sit 8 or 9 hours a day, which is all of us, right? I mean, they recommend taking a standing break every half hour. You have to get up to stand. Standing is a good thing to do. Unless you're at the movies, then you should probably sit down. But the notion that sitting for long periods of time could be hazardous to our health is very serious. And to raise awareness, I've been asked tonight by doctors? Yes, to share this special message. Please turn now to your video screens.
Studies show that sitting can lead to heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and death. So if you see someone about to sit, lend a hand. And another hand. And another hand. And a foot. Friends don't let friends sit down. Paid for by Kevin, the guy in your office who thinks he's hilarious.
I don't actually know Kevin, and we don't actually condone that, but if that works for you, then I mean, just don't sue me afterwards. So what kind of advice can I give you? Well, the first thing maybe is to get all of you to stand. Can you stand? If you can't stand, stand. So just how do you guys feel, first of all? Do you feel good? You want to stand a bit more? Can you stand a bit more? Yeah? So it's just doing something as simple as standing is what we're promoting. And you feel a little better as well. And doing that can really offset a lot of those risks that come from sitting. You don't have to pull your friends or your family's seat away from them. But you can stand. And then by standing, a lot of other people want to stand too. So let's try to make that a normal message to send across to people. Yeah, you can sit down now. Or you can keep standing if you want, but have a word with the person behind you. Sorry?
I'll just hold the chair.
If you want to, yes.
Can I ask, is it the length of the sitting, or is it the amount of the sitting?
It's both. So it's overall, it's the amount of sitting, but you don't want to be,
If
yeah.
you're stuck in a job that requires you to sit for much of the day, how often should we be getting up?
So that's a great question. I mean, I can actually, can I get back to that question in a couple of slides? But that's a really good question. I'm going to address it, but I think it might be important to maybe bring up, because in your job you have to sit a lot, but other people have different kinds of jobs, and we're fine. Yeah.
I walk around my office a lot.
Yeah.
And I wear a headset because the phone doesn't stop ringing. So I just tap it and I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
But I'm everywhere in the office. My printer is at least 100 feet away,
Yeah.
so I have to go back and forth a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, I can give you that tip. It'll be in 3 slides from now.
Okay.
But I think the first thing I want to say is that we're all different sitters. Like we sit differently, right? Our jobs are different, or our home life is different, our communities are different. And in fact, I'm finding in my research that we all have different determinants of sitting. So it can change by our biology. So some of us have to sit a lot more than others. We have, let's see, some of us have mobility issues and we have to sit more than others. It can be even a difference in gender, the type of home life we have, and who we are as a person, or our biology can affect how we sit or we don't sit. It can also have our socioeconomic status can have an impact. Our access to safe areas to walk out in the evenings, for example. Let's say we don't live in a park where we feel, in an area where there's parks where you can feel comfortable going out for a walk or just standing around. Then you might sit more and stay home a lot more. Ethnicity can play a part. So different ethnicities play put a different emphasis on sitting, let's say for cultural things. And then social cultural factors also play a part. Let's say also like where you live. If you live in an urban neighborhood, you might be closer to a grocery store where you can walk to the grocery store. But when you live in a rural area, you might choose to take the car more and sit more. So there's a lot of differences by the individual. And I want you guys to think about that when you're thinking about strategies, because we want to be able to brainstorm things that we think can work for you as well as work for other people here as well. So ultimately, we're looking at this in an onion. So we're at the middle, the individual, and we have a lot of risks, or a lot of determinants that cause us to sit. And I want you to I guess, appreciate that we can only do so much, but we also have a lot of limitations. Being in the theater and you have aches where you want to stand up, but sometimes people or theaters condone sitting, or then you would want to change that. So there's a lot of barriers towards making a change and getting standing to take off. So it's not only on the individual level, but it's your relationship with other individuals too. Let's say if sitting isn't cool right now, you might not want to sit. But if it is, if standing if standing isn't cool right now, then you might want to stand more or stand less. But if standing is cool, you want to stand up more. Our organizations can play a part. If we can pressurize our workplace or our environments and get them to think about standing as being important for our health, we can get that hopefully then to make a change in our own lifestyle too. And then our policy. So if our policymakers can then take note, and that's why I do these talks. I'd like to get as many people listening to my message, that then hopefully the people who can make those changes start to listen and will make it easier for you to make that change in your own routine. So boring talk aside, what can I tell you to do? So this is to answer your question, and the major study that really looked at how do you improve your health by standing or moving around, and this was through a randomized trial, which is a clinical trial, which found that among people who sit for long periods of time and office workers, if you get them to take breaks every 20 to 30 minutes by standing up, at least standing up for about 2 to 3 minutes and walking around, you can reduce your risk of getting type 2 diabetes. So reducing your glucose levels significantly, that you're at much lower risk if you stand. So that's in an hour, that's only 2 to 3 times in an hour. It's very doable. The new guidelines came out for office workers, and they said that optimally, if you're really, really good at this standing thing, and you're really able to do it, and you're diligent, then aim to get at least 4 hours of standing in a day. So if you think about breaking up our standing, if we can, maybe that's a lot for some of you. So why don't we aim for breaking up our chunks of sitting with standing, and then eventually adding up those chunks, and you can just kind of make a memory note about that, and then aim to get about 4 hours of standing in your overall day. And then those will be positive and possibly remove all those risks that come with sitting. But you still want to be exercising, yes.
When you say standing, so you mean not necessarily just standing, but being upright and moving?
You don't have to move. I'm saying standing because standing is the most basic thing you can be doing. Moving is even better, okay. But standing is the first thing you can do to help yourself. Yes. So what can you do to reduce your risk? And I've kind of brainstormed a couple of ideas. This is also based on feedback that I've had in different talks. And it's really, the idea is if the idea of getting yourself to stand is hard to digest, maybe thinking of it as making your day a little harder. If your day is a little easy, if you're taking the escalator a lot, or if you're taking the elevator a lot, and you're not really standing, then think about ways you can make yourself a little more uncomfortable. So you're helping your health, and then in the long term, you're living a little longer. So things like getting off the couch, and when you're watching TV, maybe standing up during the ad breaks, or standing up and watching the ad breaks. Doing chores while standing up, doing your dishes instead of by hand. So if you have mobility issues, moving your hands counts as movement. So doing the dishes by hand instead of using the dishwasher is helpful. Folding your clothes. Some people find folding your clothes and doing your ironing therapeutic. So why not doing those standing up? Watching television while standing up, I said that. Reading the morning newspaper while standing up. I have my cereal standing up. Little things, little chores you do in your day, and replacing those moments where you'd be sitting with standing. And even transport. If you're taking your car a lot, maybe you could take the bus if you can. And if you can, standing up on the bus for a little bit and giving your seat to somebody else who might need it a little more. Or some people find this helpful if you're getting your groceries, parking a little further away, and then walking a little more to get to the grocery store. That could help. Or even carrying your groceries or a couple of bags, if you can, to your car instead of carrying them all with a trolley. That could help. And using the stairs more often, if you can, than the escalator. So just making your day a little harder when you feel a little more, I guess you feel a bit more of a sweat in your day and you feel like you've done something good for yourself. So now I'm opening the floor to you guys. Any suggestions from all of you? Because I'm still learning, and I'm looking to get suggestions from you guys to really incorporate into my research, and also to maybe it'll help you guys as well in your own strategies. Yes.
As an office person, I was able to have a headset given to me that's Bluetooth, so I can be on a call for half an hour and walking around rather than
Oh, that's great.
or and sitting at my desk. And I was also able to have the desk adjusted so it actually can move up and I can stand.
Well, that's great. So you have a standing desk and you have a headset. How many of you have standing desks at work? Oh,
I just got it.
oh, great. And so your workplace have they been pushing that for among everybody, or?
No, just a couple of us just to try and see.
Oh, that's great. And how are you finding it?
It was hard at the beginning with the stool.
Yeah.
When you're used to sitting and having a backrest, now there's no backrest.
Yeah.
But it took about a week to get used to, and
Well,
it's much better now.
And actually, there was a study that looked at whether your productivity changes if you use a standing desk, and they found that it doesn't really change.
Well, mine has,
Oh, it has changed. Okay. And how are you more or less productive?
more productive.
More productive. Okay, cool. So you notice I didn't actually put standing desks on that list because I often don't bring up standing desks because it's hard to get your workplace to change. There's an investment required to get standing desks. But if you can get standing desks, then ask your whoever makes those decisions to try to get them for you, because like you found, they aren't really affecting your productivity and they're helping your productivity. And I mean, if you have a wireless headset and you're able to walk around and use the phone, and I can even just hold my phone and walk around and make my calls, that's helpful too. So I push the message of standing more because it's a lot more accessible. So if you can do that, great. If you have a standing desk, even better. Yes.
Yes, I have a story about the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth, who used to hold her staff meetings all standing up.
Huh.
Because she figured that if people stood, they would get to the point much more quickly and they get through the meeting. I don't know whether she does that now, she's getting a little long in the tooth.
It's a lot of she's a lot of antsy people, very uncomfortable people in that meeting, I can imagine. Yeah. Yes.
It is available out there where you can actually have if you have a wired-in telephone, you know, the old standard that sits on an end, and you can connect it up where it'll lift the receiver and you can have a wireless headset. So in other words, you can go all the way, you know, people, even if they have a cordless phone, which a lot of people have, they have a cordless phone, they'll tend to pick it up and sit down.
Yeah.
Right? But if you have it on your head, you can, if it's a lady, she can be cooking or what have you, and talking to her friend that she could be talking to for half an hour. Meanwhile, she's,
Well, that's really cool. Where would you get one of those?
well, I'm not associated with it, yes, but I got it about, because I've had a small office in my residence for myself. It's called Plantronics. And matter of fact, if you go, my family doctor is over here at Sunnybrook at their you know, and over there, the secretaries, that's in the front wing there, they have that.
Oh, that's
So, it's possible.
cool. Yeah.
I have a Plantronics, and the range is amazing. It's about a quarter of a mile.
Well, I don't know if this one's a
Oh,
quarter
that's
of a mile, mine's at the end of its road, but it's about 8 years old, but.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just
great.
saying
Thanks for
that-
sharing. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
When I sit down or when I lay down, this is the only time I don't have any pain. If I walk just down the driveway, I'm okay. Coming up the driveway, I get such cramps in both of my legs that I have to stop in the middle of the driveway because my pain is so great.
Yeah.
What could
So-
that be?
You know, you don't have to clock up your standing points by using your legs. If you're finding your legs are giving you pain, then maybe when you're lying down, you're using your arms and fidgeting a bit, or doing a little bit of like calisthenics or arm exercises, and that counts as movement. And maybe standing isn't the full message for you. Maybe it's just increasing your movement in the day, and that doesn't have to be walking. It could just be fidgeting or moving around and clocking those up.
Why would I get those cramps on
Oh,
those legs?
I'm not the best person to ask.
Talk to me later. Talk to me later.
Yeah, I just study sitting. I don't study the leg cramps. Sorry. Yes.
What do you think of a padded kneeling bench?
Padded kneeling bench. You have to explain what that is to me first.
A bench that you kneel on.
Okay.
It's like a church pew.
Well, if it helps you, I guess
It might help that lady with the cramps.
it might. I'm not really sure how it works, but if it's helping.
You stand, you sit, you kneel.
So
You take turns.
I would say kneeling. I don't think the evidence is out there that kneeling would necessarily count as standing, because I think it would.
But it's not sitting.
It's not sitting, but it's still sedentary behavior. It's still sedentary behavior where you're not really burning much. You know, if you remember the definition, we're saying it's sitting-like behaviors. It's not necessarily sitting. So it could be kneeling. We kind of put in that category of where you're not really burning many calories. So I would say probably not, but I have to really look into it more to give you to tell you properly.
If so, if you knelt just for 5 to 10 minutes and then change your position again.
Maybe the changing your position might help, but the kneeling, it might be considered sedentary behavior. Might be, yeah.
Do you think kneeling is sedentary?
I would say, well, it depends on how much effort you put into kneeling. If you're putting a lot of effort into it, then you might feel, you might be burning more calories, and it might be positive. But that's a good area to think about. I mean, I might have to look into that more, and
Was
yeah.
it probably part of your investigation?
It wasn't in this study, but I've always kind of classified sedentariness with kneeling as well. Well, kneeling with sedentariness. Yeah. Yes.
One of the things I was wondering, and as you say, we're sort of stuck with a lot of sitting in volume. There have been those VisioBall chairs, and any thoughts about whether that would be better than a regular chair?
Yeah, I'm not sold
or-
on them. I'm not sold
Okay.
on them because I've read a couple of studies that have actually looked at whether they're effective, and they found that it wasn't.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I mean, I guess maybe it's the companies promoting them, but maybe they're better for other things like your posture.
Mhm.
But is it going to eliminate the risk associated with sitting? It doesn't seem like it is with the
Yeah,
research
I
out
guess
there.
I was expecting there to be some muscles firing
Yeah.
to stop you.
So a
from
lot of the
moving, but I
other
guess
risks
not.
with
Not
sitting
that.
for long periods of time is that it hurts your back muscles.
Right.
So those balls might help your posture,
Mhm.
but is it going to affect the pathways that affect the risks associated with sitting? Maybe not.
Okay, thank
Yes.
I'm a little bit confused then about what the problem with sitting is. Whether it's just that there isn't a lot of muscle activation, or there's
Yeah.
cooling of the blood, or whatever, because the sitting balls that this lady's making reference to, they're to improve postural control. I'm a physio.
Okay.
They're to improve postural control, and you absolutely are more active, and you're using your abdominals and your back muscles, and you actually work harder. So what the term they use is dynamic sitting when you use a ball like that. So you can't slouch, you can't just let it all hang out. So when you say sitting is bad, you're referring to the fact that there's just not much calorie burning or much muscle action.
So,
Is that right?
yes, that's what I'm referring to. You might be right. And remember what I said, the mechanism isn't clear yet. We think it's to do with that overall toxicity of, like, you know, your muscles, your postural muscles not moving enough or being active enough for you to help regulate those metabolites. But if you are finding those balls helping, you feel like you're getting a bit of a burn, then maybe that is positive. But I'm just saying that the study and it is very preliminary right now, so we're not really sure yet. We're kind of building this evidence as we go along. But right now we're thinking that maybe it's a different type of medicine ball that isn't working, or those ball chairs aren't working, and maybe your one is. But if you are feeling a burn, maybe that is a positive thing. But we're not sure yet. Yes.
So just to speak to the kneeling, because that's kind of an area that I've looked into a little bit personally, can't speak to in terms of burning calories and all of that, but one thing with sitting is the chronic tightness through the front of the hip. So kneeling ideally would change the position of that, so putting the hip in extension over a longer period of time may help from a movement perspective.
Okay, great.
But can't really speak to in terms of raising that ball rate. And then just one quick tip to offer, in the world of smartphones, setting timers for every 45 minutes where your phone vibrates, it says get up, walk around. It's kind of a tip that I like to use.
Yeah, that's great advice. If you can find if you can find an app, or if you can just set a timer and do that.
All the iPhones have them.
Yeah, if they all have them, then that's most people have an iPhone or Android, so yes.
I find when I'm working on a project, especially on a computer, I actually set a timer to every 15 or 20 minutes. I get up and stretch and do some jumping jacks. I find that it helps me become more, sort of more aware. It gives me a chance to do a quick evaluation whether I'm working at my optimal speed. Also, part of it is in recommending for students when they're studying that they also take breaks, 15, 20, 30 minutes, and that always helps a better attention when they get back from a little break.
Yeah, great advice. Thanks. Yeah. Yes.
Can standing be also sedentary? I was thinking, like, the cheapest seats in Air Canada Centre for either hockey or basketball are the standing seats.
Right. Well, standing wouldn't be sedentary, but you know, you're getting an extra bonus for getting those cheap tickets, right? So it's like you're helping your health, and then everyone else looks at you.
More or less, I can't afford to go to Air Canada because the ticket prices are too high.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Yes.
Just one other little tip. When people stand for a long period of time, it bothers some people's backs. But if you have even just a little footstool, even like the kind from IKEA, and just put one foot up and one foot down, it's like when you're at the bar, you're standing at the bar, they've always got the rail.
Yeah. So you're just kind of like doing that movement. Yeah.
It's because it helps flatten your back and it eases back strains.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great tip. Yeah, thanks.
Or you can go to the bar.
I can go to the bar. Great. And that's it from me. If you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer them. I actually love the questions. I mean, I've been facing questions for like 3 years, and I also really like the feedback. So if you have any new suggestions for how you think you could sit less, send them my way, and maybe I'll incorporate them into other talks. That's my email address, and it was really a pleasure speaking to all of you. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Avi. Thank you very much. We appreciated that. And now we have a wonderful opportunity, I guess, to stand up and start improving our metabolism and improving our mortality, which is great. So just a couple of things. One, thank you very much, Abby. That was an enjoyable session. It will end up being online, so if you'd like to watch it again later while standing, feel free. It will be up there. And just a couple of other quick announcements. The guys from Body and Soul are going to be over here. They're our personal training crew that's been working with us for a while. They'll be around if you want to chat with them, as always. Leslie Thacker in the back has been handling the parking issues. So if anybody would like to have their parking paid for, if you talk to Leslie, we've got a little chit that we've purchased on your behalf that you can use to get out at no cost. And then second last thing, out in the hallway, we've got our light snacks and refreshments. There's some fruits and cheese and stuff like that, so you can help yourself out. And next session is going to be the third Thursday in October. Little old me is going to be speaking, and I'm going to be talking about the evidence that exists that through lifestyle, we can actually reverse coronary artery disease. So I hope to see you all then. Have a great month. Thank you very much, folks.